hope for years to come. Almighty and everlasting God, we thank you for giving us another day, special day. Once again, we begin with prayer to acknowledge our dependence on you as our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Bless our Governor General and the citizens of our land. Give us perseverance to press on through discouragement, gratitude to acknowledge you in any success. You have been the people's guide for past 100 years. You still on the people's side. You have no doubts or fears. We give special thanks that we live in a nation where peaceful readjustment of government is expected and affirmed through free elections. We ask your blessing on those newly elected or re-elected. Bless them and their families, as well as those who support or challenge them. May they fully understand the trust has been given to them to represent and serve your people. Assist us all this day and every day. So, Lord God, what we know not, what we have not, give us. What we are not, make us, through Jesus Christ.
Deferred. No, they were deferred. House is now in session. I'm not yet in receipt of the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, the 5th of June, 2018. So we'll take the usual motion.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the minutes of the 5th of June of the Honourable House of Assembly be deferred until further notice. Second.
Make the second answer.
Question is that the minutes of the meeting held Tuesday, 5th of June, 2018 be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Announcements by Your Honour the Speaker.
I'm in receipt of a message from the Honourable the Senate to this Honourable House. Message from the Honourable the Senate to the Honourable the House of Assembly. The Honourable the Senate has the honour to inform the Honourable the House Assembly that at its sitting on Friday, 8th June 2018, the Constitution Amendment Bill 2018 was amended by deleting paragraph C of the long title and clause 5 of the bill. Pursuant to those amendments, the following consequential corrections to the bill were approved. Under the heading Objects and Reasons, at paragraph A, the word "and" was added after the semicolon. At paragraph B, the semicolon and the word "and" were deleted after the word "assembly," and a full stop substituted therefore. Under the heading Arrangement of Sections, clause 5 was deleted. And the Honorable the Senate transmits the amended bill to the Honorable the House of Assembly, inviting concurrence in the amendments of the bill. Dated the 8th day of June, 2018, signed by the President.
From Her Excellency, the Governor General, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that standing orders number 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Question is that the aforementioned standing orders be adjourned for the remainder of the day. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Deal.
Question is that the aforementioned standing orders be adjourned for the remainder of the day.
Suspended.
Be suspended for the remainder of the day. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those in favor, against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders be now suspended for the remainder of the day.
Government business. Order number 1, in the name of the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, to present the annual financial statement and budgetary proposals 2018.
The Honorable Prime Minister.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, sir. I stand before you 18 days since the good people of Barbados went to the polls and elected my party, the Barbados Labour Party, to office with an overwhelming, indeed, an unprecedented mandate. This mandate, Mr. Speaker, was to stop the hemorrhaging and decay and return our beloved nation to a status of pride and enjoyment by residents and to the admiration of friends and nations near and far. 18 days after a 30-0 victory, Mr. Speaker, I would have much preferred to be celebrating today. Still celebrating, I say. To be out thanking the good people of Barbados for the tremendous confidence that they have reposed in me and the government that I have the honor to lead. But nothing discourages this more than the first 2 paragraphs of the just released report of the visiting mission team from the International Monetary Fund. And I quote, "Barbados is in a precarious economic situation. International reserves have dwindled to $220 million US, while central government debt is unsustainable. The fiscal deficit has increased over the last few years, but remains large at about 4% of GDP in financial year 2017-2018. Meanwhile, the Central Bank of Barbados is reporting a contraction of output of 0.7% in the first quarter of 2018 over the same period last year. The Barbadian authorities, in close consultation with their social partners, are rapidly developing a plan to address current economic vulnerabilities. We welcome the government's plans to urgently address infrastructure problems and its goal of seeking to support the most vulnerable during the economic addressment process." Unquote. I know, Mr. Speaker, we have just emerged from a grueling campaign in which all manner of things were said, and from which the people of Barbados could be forgiven were they to assume that a change of government, passage of time, and a few cosmetic changes would together be the panacea to our nation's problems. A change of government was needed, sir, but that in and of itself will not be enough to bring us back from the precipice. Irrespective of the outcome of the elections, it was clear to the Barbadian electorate, sir, that urgent action would be needed the very morning after. The people's vote was not, therefore, about determining whether hard decisions had to be made. It was about determining, in their own wisdom, who was best qualified, most able, and most trusted to make those decisions in their name. That question was answered by the emphatic expression of the will of the people. And my government, sir, is humbled by the overwhelming vote of confidence and acutely conscious at the same time of the solemn obligation that has been placed upon us to bring Barbados back from the brink. I pledge then, as I do now, that the first task of a new Barbados Labour Party administration would be to halt the decline and the decay of the last 10 years, to restore confidence and hope, and to set clear guidelines and timelines for finding and applying solutions to our most critical challenges. I gave my word that a Barbados Labour Party government under my leadership would respond courageously to the social and economic crises now facing the country, and that we would make the tough choices between what is essential, what is highly desirable, and what is optional. And I said, sir, that at all relevant stages of the process, we would keep the Parliament and the people of Barbados fully informed. Mr. Speaker, sir, in prioritizing that which is absolutely essential, the immediate task of my government has been to confront head-on the dire economic circumstances we have inherited. Our consultations with the Social Partnership and with the International Monetary Fund have already been the subject of brief public statements. So too has been our engagement of our advisors for our debt restructuring. Today, sir, I bring before the Parliament and the people of Barbados a fuller assessment of what we have found, the course of action we have agreed upon, and the budgetary measures that will be required in the first phase of our economic recovery and transformation plan. Mr. Speaker, sir, let us be clear. Barbadians may not all understand the intricacies of macroeconomics, but their astute common sense observation of everyday realities tells me that they already know that something far-reaching is now called for in this nation. As I move around this country, That is what they're telling me from all walks of life, Mr. Speaker. And if they were not yet quite convinced of this before, when they heard the IMF Chief of Mission, whom I just quoted, speak, they would be left in no doubt as to the need for immediate action. And thus today, the 11th day of June, 2018, I am here to say to our nation, Mr. Speaker, that Barbados no longer has the luxury of time. Dithering, procrastination, and indecision are relics of a calamitous past that has brought us to the verge of economic collapse, sir. The country cannot afford to wait another day. And the economic medicine we must now prescribe is more bitter than it would have been had its application not been so negligently, callously, and I'm almost tempted to say criminally, delayed. Instead, we got 8 botched plans, 23 credit downgrades, and a horrendous accumulation of arrears owed by the government of Barbados. The medicine, sir, is now overdue. Failure to act would replace a calamitous situation to which I just referred with a catastrophe. I say, sir, it is vital that we act. If we are to save our way of life, the Barbadian way of life, if we are to save the value of our dollar, Mr. Speaker, action, therefore, is both immediate and urgent. So, sir, our nation stands on the brink of its biggest battle that we've had to face in our 52 years. And as I said, if we shy away from this battle now, our debt, sir, will devour us. Today, servicing our debt consumes more money than the entire central government wage bill. I want to repeat myself. Servicing Barbados's debt, our interest bill, consumes more than the entire central government wage bill. It consumes equally, if I were to use a different measurement, more than we spend on education and health care across the entire nation. We spend almost $800 million in interest alone in our debt. It is a tight chain strangling our throat, and it has done so for a while. It is the one reason why the previous government stood idly by as our roads sunk below sewage. Unsustainable debt traps you into an eternal descent, sir, with no room to move, unable to grasp any opportunities to go forward or to modernize our nation. With no prospect of progress, our young people will leave, sir, for greener pastures. Our entrepreneurs will find no platform for their ideas, and our businessmen will show no appetite for expansion or new investment. Indeed, sir, that has more or less appropriately captured our reality in the last few years. Our economy and our country will fossilize under debt. Unless we get it down to sustainable levels, it will grow and consume more and more of our budget, leaving no space for anything else. Like a vine that wants to strangle out every other living thing. With each passing year, sir, we will lose more and more of those vital, cherished aspects like our education, our health, our public beaches, our peace, our security. Indeed, the downward slide, as I said, has already started. And the previous government tried to hide it with the accumulation of arrears and brave talk, but they could not fool Barbadians. In good old Bajan parlance, sir, you can hide and buy land, but you can't hide and work it. The truth, sir, will always come out. Mr. Speaker, sir, let us be clear again. Your government must always be an instrument of development for our people and our country. For too much of our colonial history, this Parliament and government in this country were instruments of oppression for our people. The promise of independence for us all was for us to have a government that would become an instrument of development, that would provide fair and ample opportunities for all Bajans to prosper and to grow to the best of their natural capabilities, and to create, as one, a decent life, a decent quality of life for our people, for every single Barbadian. The cruelest irony, I say to you, is that it was the last Democratic Labour Party administration that robbed us of the promise of independence. Imagine that, sir. It is the cruelest irony of all. I say to you, sir, that once we see off this battle, Barbadians will be able, believe you me, to invest in our future once more. We will be able to take control of our fate, to make Barbados the best place to live, work, and enjoy life, in a country that is green, climate resilient, that aims to be fossil-free, a smart technological nation, a digital nation, a culturally rich and diverse nation, a country that allows us, sir, to be whatever we want to be. And Mr. Speaker, we do that while seeking to build a cohesive, sustainable nation built on principles of equal access to social justice and to economic opportunity. The Leader of the Opposition knows why I say that. But to do so, sir, we first need to fight to regain control of our fate. And this battle to save our dollar, as I said earlier, is a battle to defend also our choice of free education for all, to preserve our choice of accessible health care for all, to preserve a social compact that we feel strongly about as Barbadians. It is a battle to ensure, sir, that our schools are vibrant and safe, that guns and lawlessness do not hijack our streets. Mr. Speaker, it is a battle to protect our very way of life, our passion for social justice. It is a battle, sir, of the essence of what is Barbados and who are we as Barbadians. It is against this background, sir, that I am indeed humbled that we recognize that what we are fighting for is our economic independence, which the last administration put at risk. And I say to you that this is no less a battle than the one fought 52 years ago for our political independence. We will not surrender Barbados to become a failed state. I want to repeat myself. We will not surrender Barbados to become a failed state. Ours must not be a nation in which Barbadians live in despair and deprivation. We've already seen glimpses of what that looks like during the last decade. And that is why we act today, now, and with all haste. And the stakes could not be higher. In the last 2 weeks since being elected, sir, we have worked tirelessly. We've asked some of the best and brightest in our country to join with us, and they have answered the call. We've worked hand in hand with a revitalized social partnership. And I want, from this spot today, to say how proud I am to lead this country today at a time when we have leaders of the caliber that we have in our social partnership who have expressed and reflected a level of patriotism that is humbling. In near 40 hours of face-to-face meetings with the social partnership in the last 10 days, and I apologize to their families for encroaching and trespassing upon their time. We've agreed upon the mission and the steps to be taken as we go forward. we agreed on the need to save the Barbados dollar. We called in the International Monetary Fund as a government to assist us in providing liquidity support for our international reserves and to provide an independent assessment, and never let us forget the virtue of it, an independent assessment of our recovery and transformation plan, so that all of our domestic and external stakeholders could garner and gain confidence. We've also moved to restructure the debt for the reasons that I've already given to the country. It is now my duty, sir, to call upon all Barbadians, and I mean all Barbadians, to play their part in the rescuing of our nation. Mr. Speaker, sir, we could not hesitate or wait to take the difficult decisions, as I said. One of the difficult things for me was what I regarded was one of the last acts of malice done to the people of this country by the last Democratic Labour Party government. They purposely dragged out the election date, in my view, so that it fell only a few short days from the due date of international payments. I almost believe it was a scorched earth policy. Making these lumpy payments against the background of minimal foreign reserves, rising oil prices, rising interest rates, in the midst of a hurricane season that started within days of the election, all of these things would have contributed to put our dollar peg in serious jeopardy. And that is why, sir, we had to take the preemptive action that we did last week to protect the value of our dollar, and I dare say, the quality of our life. That is why I described the leaving of the elections to this last moment as an almost criminal act for me. And I have no doubt, sir, that is why the electorate showed the Democratic Labour Party no mercy, and frankly, they deserve nothing less. When I think of what we once had, and what we took long years to build, what they frivolously have frittered away, what they force us to do today, I am furious. I am furious. And this last DLP government was so bereft of honor, integrity, and shame that they have truly left Barbados on the edge of a precipice. Mr. Speaker, our actions in entering a debt restructuring were not taken lightly, but it gives us breathing space to repair our reserves, to return our debt to a more sustainable path, and to pull the Barbados dollar back to safety. Largely as a result of the imposition of the National Social Responsibility Levy and the consequential doubling of our inflation rate in the last year, the Central Bank of Barbados is reporting a contraction of output of 0.7% for the first quarter of 2018 over the same period last year. Although the NSRL is a heavy drag on growth, the fiscal deficit remains large, almost $447 million during the last fiscal year. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, this distortionary tax, and I want to remind the public of this, has only yielded 50% of what the previous Minister of Finance indicated that it would yield when he introduced it into this House of Assembly, moving it from 2% to 10%. It was intended to yield, according to him, $281 million, and the output is going to be about $145 million. Therein lies a tale in and of itself. So when I say, sir, that we have lost a nation, our nation has lost a decade, let us be clear. 10 years of large deficit funding, inflated contracts, 10 years of large deficits, inflating contracts, funding inflated contracts, sir, have resulted in this unsustainable level of debt. I have already told the country that we left the debt at $6 billion, and it stands on or about $15 billion today, with nothing to show for the increase of $9 billion in additional debt. The previous government has already been defaulting against payments owed to Barbadians for the past 5 years. That is what these arrears of almost $1.8 billion as of May 31st last week is about. And we are still collecting the data. $460 million is owed to the National Insurance Scheme alone. $345 million is owed to Barbadians and individual companies by the Barbados Revenue Authority. The arrears are horrific. But we, sir, shall negotiate and settle legitimate arrears over the course of the next year. I've already started to talk, sir, to the country about the many contracts signed in the dying days of that government that had long seen the dissolution of a parliament. In other words, contracts signed after parliament was dissolved. Or dissolved, not was dissolved. We must investigate how to get a better deal for Barbadians from these hastily concluded contracts and leases that the previous government signed off on at lightning speed, even as the nation was within days of a poll. We believe that the only way to restore the honor and the word of the Barbados government is to commit from this government, sir, to run our finances in such a way that all current payments are done on time. This mini-budget and all future budgets must be based on doing so, ensuring that we do not build up ongoing arrears. It's going to be difficult, but we need to do it. To reinforce that commitment, sir, we must make all efforts to remain current in our payments. And we must reflect the true cost of government. We must not, as the previous government did, present to Parliament figures that failed to reflect our total liability for goods and services, and that could be appropriately described, as I did many a time, as political cosmetology. When our arrears, sir, are added to contingent liabilities like those the Democratic Labour Party committed the government of Barbados to offer its friends and businesses, the government's debt to GDP ratio is close to 175% of GDP. The reason why analysts compare debt to GDP or output of a nation, sir, is that the amount of output is a measure of the capacity and the ability of a country to repay its debt. And when debt rises so far above capacity to pay, it becomes unsustainable and of questionable value. We know it in our own lives. The debt to GDP level that they left us with puts Barbados among the most indebted countries in the world. The only countries with higher debt to GDP ratios are Greece, which has benefited from over $250 billion of support from the European Union institutions, and Japan, where deflation and a strong currency has meant that they can service their debts with very low interest rates. Neither option, sir, is available, I regret, to the people of Barbados. So what must we do? And forgive me if I spoke long in explaining where we are and what we've inherited, but it is critical that Barbadians appreciate what has been left. We, sir, the people of Barbados, I think, know instinctively these hard truths. And we feel on this side that our people did not give us a historic mandate because they believe that we possess the magic wand, as much as some may want to feel so. We, in turn, were frank that we could not shirk our responsibility to take the tough decisions necessary. In making these difficult determinations, we promise to follow two simple principles. The first, I repeat, the first is that the burden must be shared by all of us. The burden must be shared by all of us. Labor, the workers, cannot always be asked to shoulder all the burden, but neither must capital be asked to bear the pain, all of it. Our second key principle is that we must always protect the most vulnerable in our society. Indeed, the IMF report states that and gives us that clear understanding that they too appreciate our philosophical approach in this respect. Our collective humanity demands nothing less. Barbados once stood for social justice and fairness, and under the leadership that I bring to this government, it shall do so again. We will reduce our debt to sustainable levels. We will follow a plan that will bring the debt to GDP ratio down from the close to 175% where it is now to below 115% at the end of the next 5 years. And if the people of Barbados are so good as to give us a continuing mandate, without being presumptuous, we will bring it to below 85% by the end of 10 years from today. How will we get there? We will get there in 3 ways. 1, we will promote growth without the overuse of tax concessions or subsidies. Without growth, we have nothing. That's what GDP is all about, growth. Our belief is that Barbados has considerable growth opportunities in the renewable energy sector, in truly creating a green Barbados, in technology and smart government, in developing creative and artistic industries, in reviving our sugar-related agro-industries, rum, in better championing our international business sector, and most fundamentally, by backing ordinary people, ordinary Barbadians, facilitating their training and their entrepreneurship, and providing high-quality public infrastructure and services, including broadband across our nation. We believe we can partly capture these opportunities through a quicker town and country planning process. And from next week, we go to that process with the same vigor that we dealt with the social partnership in the preparation of this budget. The rest of government must be quicker at processing permits and licenses. I have already spoken to the Minister of Commerce, the member for St. George South, about his duty in making this happen, and in particular for those who have been inhibited as they prepare for crop over, because for them this is the one opportunity that they can raise some money to be able to help raise the money to send their children back to school. Government must not criminalize entrepreneurship during crop over for our citizens. We must have more investment, friendly, predictable, transparent, legal, and fiscal regimes without the most unfortunate giveaways that have come to block this country's history. And government should set examples for others to follow. My government will move rapidly to adopt electric vehicles, as you will hear later today, solar-powered buildings, 24/7 online services and digital payments. That is why we have a dedicated ministry for smart technology and reconstructing government. Done smartly, none of these transformational things will have lasting impact on our budgets other than giving it a positive boost. We don't need to tax and spend to achieve many of the things that we want to do. And my government will be announcing several measures that will trigger and propel growth in this country, not in today's statement, but in the coming weeks. And we will ensure that Green Barbados strategies will also be addressed through ministerial statements as we go forward. 2, public debt will be restructured to bring it to more sustainable levels. Negotiations with our creditors have started. These negotiations will be carried out in the same spirit of fairness and protection of the most vulnerable as all other negotiations. We are asking simply, sir, our creditors to walk with us. We ask that all must share the burden. I say no more on this because I admit that we have our debt advisors, and as good lawyers say, a lawyer who has himself for a client is a fool and a bad lawyer. 3, Mr. Speaker, sir, all of this means that we must consolidate our fiscal position in a significant manner. Through the combination of debt restructuring and fiscal consolidation, we aim to overturn 10 long years of large fiscal deficits. Forgive me if I pause here to remind us what really is the contrast. And I thank the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, who I am so proud to see in this Honourable House of Assembly, given that my first introduction to him was this piece of work that I continue to quote because it so captures the contrast of what we had in the last decade from who we are as Barbadians. Between 1955 and 2007, and let it be entered into the records of this Parliament for all time, between 1955 and 2007, Barbadian governments ran 5 current account fiscal deficits. In other words, they spent more money than we earned to deal with day-to-day expenditure on only 5 occasions. Never 2 consecutive years, and never more than $20 million across 6 administrations under the leadership of the Right Excellent Sir Grantley Herbert Adams, under the leadership of Dr. Hugh Gordon Cummins, under the leadership of Errol Walton Barrow, the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, under the leadership of the Right Honourable JMGM Tom Adams, under the leadership of the Right Honourable Sir Harold Bernard St. John, under the leadership of Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, under the leadership of the Right Honourable Wayne Arthur. All of those governments only ran 5 current account fiscal deficits: 1962, 1974, 1977, 1991, and 1994. This country, however, has come to see one single government run 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, into 18. How does one government so alter the character and behavior of a nation, the profile of a people, the DNA of a people, such that we find ourselves in this difficult situation today, and that a government that I lead with less than 2 weeks today, these ministers have been sworn in, less than 2 weeks, 40 hours of meetings with the social partners, and we find ourselves coming today now to take the most serious of measures to preserve the nature of our country and the integrity of our country and the stability of our way of life and the value of our dollar for our children and our grandchildren. One government, reckless at best, criminal at worst, in its conduct, in its mission, in its attitude, in its behavior. Mr. Speaker, sir, this government will commit to running fiscal surpluses. And we recognize that the tools available to every previous leader who stood where I stand today will not be available to me because of that lost decade. The Bible gives us 70, and they took 10. Sir, we don't have those same options, and we have now to commit to running a fiscal surplus and being creative in how we use the other tools of government to achieve what we need to achieve through legislation, through empowerment, through facilitation, through investment, through regulation. We also don't have the same tools in terms of attracting foreign capital here in international manufacturing under the very often referred to industrialization by invitation because of the position taken by the WTO and the EU as to the inapplicability of that legislation to the kind of development that we could move forward on post-December 2016. Did the last government give us the alternative and replace it? No, it did not. We have that too to deal with. So I say, sir, while Mr. Barrow stood in this spot and told this nation of the importance of running deficits for the development of our people, I have now to stand here to commit to fiscal surpluses to save our way of life and to save our dollar. We will close the fiscal deficit, we believe, completely by the end of this year. We will achieve this more comfortably in year 2 of our plan, and we believe that by year 3 we will be running surpluses in excess of 3% with the help of the people of Barbados. Let me say up front, sir, and let me be very clear, these surpluses will be used to buy back our debt and to repay the arrears left by the previous Democratic Labour Party government, because that is who we are as a people. The percentages that I just mentioned can underplay the significance of what must be done. But let me put it in clear terms for everybody to understand, sir. This is a $1.2 billion adjustment plan under a period of 3 years. A $1.2 billion plan to execute within the next 3 years. This is tougher, Mr. Speaker, than anything we have ever attempted as a nation before, but it is necessary due to our current circumstance. And I believe, sir, together, in here and out there, we can do this, Mr. Speaker. I believe so. The Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, therefore, sir, will be done in 3 phases. Our announcements today represent the first phase, which we will largely execute within the next 3 months, within the first 3 months of this government. It focuses on the imposition of user fees on domestic and international players to take 3 statutory corporations completely off of the consolidated fund and 1 other partially off of the consolidated fund. Please let me repeat myself. This plan in phase 1 in this first 3 months focuses on the imposition of user fees on both domestic and international players to take 3 statutory corporations who are currently funded by the consolidated fund completely off the consolidated fund, and to take partial payments of 1 off as well. Who are they that will account for this reduction of expenditure of $215 million in a full fiscal year? It is the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. I believe the Democratic Labour Party tried to raise a bogeyman of the other TB, Transport Board. We start not with them, we start with our partners in tourism today, because we believe they have the maturity, the capacity, and the ability to lift this country out and to be able to help us build a new platform for the continued growth and propulsion of our tourism sector. Its allied entity is the Barbados Tourism Product, Inc. The government of Barbados now spends $96.3 million in this current fiscal year on these entities. By so removing them off of the consolidated fund, there will be a reduction in expenditure of $96.3 million, and I will come later in my address as to how they will be able to do their job with reduced dedicated funding that the government of Barbados will now put in place for them, utilizing both domestic and international players to make sure that they can carry our tourism to the next level. Similarly, the Sanitation Services Authority currently needs but has not been voted this year, last year, or the year before $65 million to do its job, both in terms of the collection of garbage as well as the payment of its contractual obligations to SBRC. And indeed, sir, the fourth one, which is partial, will be a $45 million contribution to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital that needs 4 times that amount to be able to run its affairs. And this will be done by isolating that $45 million to go to the QEH without passing through consolidated fund. It is a case of monopoly, do not pass, go, but instead of going to jail, go straight to the QEH. And I say so, sir, because the last government stood here and used the QEH as the justification for the imposition of the National Social Responsibility Levy, which is yet to see a cent directly applied to it from the imposition of the NSRL. Phase 1, sir, also focuses on a review of our tax revenue to impose more effective taxes, increase compliance, broaden our base generally, as I said, between others now, domestic and others visiting our shores. This will better allow us to reduce the fiscal deficit in the first year of our plan, as I just promised. Phase 2, sir, months 3 to 12, will focus on expenditure reduction through a more thorough review and analysis of central government and state-owned enterprises, focusing on the more simpler ones, the merger of potentially affiliated entities such as Corporate Affairs and the Financial Services Commission, both of which receive subsidies from the government of Barbados through central government now. We will also review, sir, other entities that may not require the heavy lifting, because those that need heavy lifting will be left for phase 3, which is months 12 to 30. And we know some of what those are. We will review the framework within which the international business sector during phase 2, sir, must operate, given the blacklisting by the OECD and the grey listing by the European Union. And we have agreed, sir, that rather than impose taxation on that sector today in today's budget, given those realities that they now face with those listings, that we will await the report, as I will discuss later, to impose those taxes in a one-off, seamless transition as we transition that sector to whatever reality we negotiate with the OECD. And let me say here, for the record, a previous Barbados Labour Party government fought to save the international business sector in 1999-2000. It is of great regret to me that the previous government laid down and did not raise a finger to save this sector when the fight started to come from all quarters in the EU and the OECD. And it is only at the last minute, when things came desperate and when we moved to a situation of blacklisting and double blacklisting, in fact, last December, that we started to hear and see some level of activity on the part of the government that could seriously put us in a position where we need to. Sir, we will also in phase 2 move assiduously to embark upon measures to boost growth. And I have said to you that we will address the proposed growth measures in a comprehensive statement in the coming weeks, because we feel that it is important today to focus on the fiscal for obvious reasons, in the same way that we focused on the debt restructuring last week for obvious reasons. Phase 3, sir, month 12 to 30, we'll see a continuation of the review of all remaining state-owned enterprises and departments of government. We will determine what expenditure is essential, what is desirable, and what is optional. Not because we have nothing else better to do, but because this discipline is what will bring us to safety in this country. We have said over and over that government, as I just told you, cannot be about tax and spending alone. And I've already alluded to the other powers that we will deal with. Our government is now in the process of setting about to embark on an environmental scoping study to determine the feasibility of the reclamation of lands and islands. If it is feasible, we will do it, but we will not spend a single cent of the public money. We will not add a cent to our public debt to do it, because we can achieve it through a legislative framework passed by this honorable chamber, which will give this country new opportunities for greenfield investment within our tourism sector, and will allow Barbados to become the truly iconic destination that we have always been intended to be globally. So that, sir, we have options. We must also similarly, sir, engage in comprehensive dialogue with our social partners and all Barbadians as to how and where we proceed with these state-owned enterprises. This is not a government by pronouncement and dictatorial in its manner. This is a conversation that affects all Barbadians. And once people are given the facts, shared the realities, then, like every mature family and every mature nation, we discuss what we want of our future. We know that we can want everything, but let us start first with our needs before we get to our wants. Mr. Speaker, sir, we hope in phase 3 too, that by the time it comes, we will have by then received a report on the comprehensive reform of our tax policy, looking once again at all of our taxes. The last such comprehensive reform, sir, was undertaken more than 25 years ago. The time for it has come. And without prejudice to what we must do today to stop the bleeding, it is time that we review our complete tax system once again for the purpose of the next 15 to 20 years. Sir, we expect that phases 2 and 3 will each generate a further $200 million of additional revenue and reduce expenditures. And that is how we shall get where we need to get with the plan. We are not leaving the heavy lifting for later. We are not kicking the can down the road as the last administration did for almost 8 years, when they had the first national consultation on difficulties in the economy at Sherburne, the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford complex in March 2010. I shall never forget it. When their first fiscal adjustment plan was issued in 2010, when before we were still at investment grade, and they kicked the can down the road year by year, 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 until the people of Barbados took the can and kicked them down the road. Mr. Speaker, sir, in this first step, our focus is on the mission-critical expenditures to protect the most vulnerable in our society, and on the revenues that can be raised promptly. One of the benefits of having served in every area of government and with cabinet with members who have also served is that we know government and we know what is executable and what is not. We know what can be raised promptly and what requires additional time and what must be phased into phase 2 or phase 3. The net impact of this mini budget, sir, will be to reduce the fiscal deficit in a full year by $182 million, representing a current account surplus. The combined effect of this budget and phases 2 and 3 will be to reduce expenditure and raise revenues by approximately $330 million once fully in effect. And over the course of the 3 years, as I said, this will improve the fiscal position by almost 1.2 billion Barbados dollars. Mr. Speaker, this plan, this first phase, you know why it is going to work, sir? It's not my plan. It's not our plan. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the people's plan. And that is why we believe it will work. For the most part, it has come from many long hours of discussion and agreement with all of our social partners. Each of them have a mandate representing institutions, in some instances, management of billions of dollars of capital in some instances, tens of thousands of workers, and each of us in here, with the exception of one, represent, or maybe I should say each of us did represent 112,000 votes recently given in the last election. So that I say to you, sir, that this is a plan of solidarity. And it's a plan that profits from something uniquely Barbadian, our willingness to empathize, to carry each other's burden. That's who Bajans are. And to live harmoniously together. I learned as a child about the share pot mentality. It is a partnership plan based on a partnership of Barbadian pride and industry. And Mr. Speaker, I want the public to hear me clearly before I go into the specifics. This plan departs from all previous plans presented to this honorable chamber in 4 fundamental ways. I want people to listen in 4 fundamental ways. Firstly, all of the burden does not fall on any one group, as it did previously under the last government when it fell on labor, the workers, under the last administration. We are sharing the burden with labor and capital through our intention to pursue debt restructuring. The last government refused in this chamber to address the issue of debt, even though they were exhorted to do so both within and without. In this chamber and outside of this chamber. In their cabinet and outside of their cabinet. Secondly, we are sharing the burden of taxation today and user fees between Barbadians and international players, not simply on the same group of people who have had to carry the burden for the last 8 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, you have heard me say over and over that 3 times our population visits this country on an annual basis. Almost 3 times the number of Barbadians who live here come to visit us from over and away each and every year. And these persons are our friends, but they utilize our services and our infrastructure. And all we are doing, sir, is merely asking them to help us carry a little small piece of the cost. Thirdly, we believe that a plan that is owned by all is a plan that is followed by all, is a plan that succeeds. And consultation and ownership for us is the bedrock of the success of this plan, we will remain faithful, Mr. Speaker, sir, as well, and true, fourthly, to the numbers, to the numbers, to the numbers. As I said earlier, you can hide and buy land, but you can't hide and work it. The true cost of running a government, as we adjust, has now to be reflected in the numbers that we present to this honorable chamber. And the days of literally bringing here what is convenient to add up to a certain figure and leaving behind amounts due and owing to leave to accumulate to horrendous arrears have now to be a historic relic, never to be seen by the people of Barbados again. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me come to the measures now. I will now introduce the individual measures, starting, sir, with the revenue measures. As promised, sir, we will repeal the National Social Responsibility Levy from the 1st of July this year. This distortionary tax has led to a revenue gain of $145 million. But when the NSRL was put on, many prices across Barbados rose by double digits, depressing retail sales and tolls significantly, and economic activity generally. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are conscious that the Central Bank of Barbados reflected that there was a doubling of inflation, as I said earlier, in 2017, caused predominantly by the astronomical increase in the rate of the NSRL. It is for this reason that we committed to its removal since October last year at our annual conference. My government expects that the removal of this distortionary levy will lead within 2 months after our consultations with the private sector, will lead within 2 months to a reduction in prices for the average Barbadian. The social partnership has agreed to help us monitor this situation, and it is within 2 months because you already have stock on island that would have paid NSRL prior to this announcement today. But in addition, Mr. Speaker, the Fair Trading Commission will be asked to monitor developments to ensure that both producers and retailers, because that is whom we're subject to the NSRL, both producers and retailers reduce their prices appropriately, including the related reduction in value-added tax that will of necessity come about through the removal of the NSRL. The fuel tax. From July 1st, sir, the government of Barbados will abolish the road tax and replace it with what we believe to be a more efficient fuel tax. The fuel tax will be levied at a rate of 40 cents per litre of petrol, 40 cents per litre of diesel, and 5 cents per litre of kerosene. Please make sure he gets it from me. No? Okay. The public must be told that the NSRL was levied to the tune of 12 cents on each litre of gasoline and 11 cents on each litre of diesel, so that when we set the price for the road tax at 40 cents, the net increase on gasoline is in fact only 28 cents per litre because of what the government was already collecting without your knowing on every litre of gasoline, and 29 cents on every litre of diesel net. Let us remember, sir, that as we impose this fuel tax, the road user is no longer paying the lumpy road tax, whether it is at $400 or up to the $1,600 that they would hitherto have paid up until now. To put this in perspective, under the existing road tax, car owners paid effectively from $33 per month to up to $133 per month. From $33 up to 133. Many taxpayers do not have that amount of cash to spare at once. We know from our constituents. And enforcement is also difficult in Barbados with limited police resources. The average motorist is unlikely to pay more under this new fuel tax than they pay in road tax. The improved collection afforded us will mean that the fuel tax is likely to raise, in our view, $80 million, while the combined road tax only brought $65 million. And we say this because we believe of the level of non-compliance that exists on the road today. Mr. Speaker, sir, there will still be a need for the registration of vehicles on the road. And the new fee from July 1st, 2018 for registration will simply be upon purchase of a new car or a second-hand car. It will not be an annual fee, and that new fee for registration will be $400 to help us offset the cost of administration. All persons purchasing commercial vehicles, whether new or second-hand, will pay a registration fee of $1,000. But wait, the commercial vehicles which now pay a much higher registration fee will still be required to register on an annual basis, but instead of paying the high fee, in the instance of some at $10,000, they will now pay 50% of the previous fee given the fuel tax, the existence of the fuel tax. This is expected to yield $5 million. To put it in perspective, sir, a public service vehicle now pays $10,000 a year for a license. They will have to pay $1,000 upon registration when they buy it, and thereafter they will pay on an annual basis, instead of $10,000, $5,000 a year, because we recognize that the imposition of the fuel tax will hit them harder than most other vehicles. Similarly, other commercial vehicles like buses and coaches. Income tax. Effective, sir, from July 1st, we will introduce a new upper income tax band of 40%. Accordingly, the first $25,000 will remain tax-free. Income from $25,001 to $60,000 will continue to attract the rate of 16%. Incomes between $60,001, assessable incomes, I should say, between $60,001 to $75,000 will attract a rate of 33.5%. To improve the progressive nature of our tax system, such that we may share the burden fairly, the principle I enunciated, we will introduce a new higher rate band of 40% on those whose incomes, whose assessable incomes are greater than $75,001. These new tax rates are expected to raise $41 million in a full tax year. And once the debt to GDP falls, Mr. Speaker, to our target, I would like to think that we can anticipate returning to the old rates. But we need to get out of this situation. The Barbados Revenue Authority, sir, also is carrying on its books amounts due and owing to the government of Barbados since 1968. I was 3 years old at the time. Most of that is now clearly uncollectible. The Barbados Revenue Authority, through the Revenue Commissioner, has recommended to the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry has accepted its recommendations, that we write off all taxes owed from the tax years 1968 to 2000. We consulted with the social partnership on this determination too before making this announcement today to the people of Barbados. Furthermore, that between 2000 and 2017, as long as outstanding payments are made or a payment plan is agreed to with the Barbados Revenue Authority, they will waive all interest and penalties due and owing by taxpayers. let me repeat, between 2000 to 2017, as long as a taxpayer pays in full or comes in and makes arrangements to pay in installments with a plan that is agreed to by BRA, that BRA will waive all penalties and interest for that taxpayer. From 2018, interest and penalties will be applicable for all taxes due and owing. Just as the government is being asked to stay current by me, I am asking Barbadians to stay current with BRA. The government, however, will also move on the recommendation of the Barbados Revenue Authority to amend the law to move from the use of compound interest to the use of simple interest. This should ease a tremendous burden on Barbadian taxpayers when interest is now applied to taxes due and owing. It is too simple a measure not to have been done before. May I also say that we will also move to amend the law to reintroduce 2 tribunals, because the last government changed the law to allow the Minister of Finance to waive penalties and interest for taxpayers. I want you to read my lips. I do not want the power as Minister of Finance to waive penalties and interest for anybody less some to the VAT Appeals Tribunal, which will be reinstated with the amendment to 2 tribunals. And similarly to the other tribunals sitting that will have that power to waive penalties and interest. The opportunity for people to make allegations unfairly will not be made available to anyone against any member of this government with respect to this matter. Further, our government recognizes that very often persons are willing to make themselves right with BRA, with the payment of taxes, but they cannot secure the lump sum that may be due and owing. They go to the bank, and the bank requires of them a process that they cannot get through in order to be able to make the payments in time, certainly when amnesties existed. In these circumstances, we believe that what matters is that BRA gets the money. And therefore, if persons are prepared to enter into arrangements with BRA, if defaulting taxpayers come and enter into a payment plan with BRA, which will have a capped outer limit as we discussed with the social partnership, then BRA should be prepared to accept that payment plan, and that BRA equally will draft an agreement that says that penalties and interest shall be waived so long as that person holds to the payment plan, recognizing, Mr. Speaker, that holding to a payment plan must take into account also the vicissitudes of business cycles and the uneven nature of cash flow. So what does this mean? Enough pretty language. That if you make a payment plan with BRA to pay what you have to pay over a 5-year period, and you have a business that has typically a soft summer, and therefore the cash flow is not there, that in spite of the soft summer, so long as you do not miss 6 straight months, or so long as you do not miss 9 months out of 24 months, in other words, so long as you don't try to make mock sport of BRA, that you will be allowed to adhere to your payment plan. But the day that you make mock sport of BRA, or the day that you breach it for 6 successive months, the penalties and interest become due and owing all over again. Mr. Speaker, may I also add at this stage, later on you will hear me speak to a sum of money to be able to strengthen the compliance and arrears unit at BRA, so that they can assiduously go after those who, in these new circumstances, still do not want to come within the tax net. And secondly, to strengthen the compliance unit of the customs of Barbados so that their revenue section is not unfairly impeded as well in the execution of its duties. May I say, sir, that, and I use this opportunity because I've not had any other similar public opportunity, that it is the resolve of my government to hold its promise that we believe that customs is a revenue authority, a border security agency, and not simply a revenue authority. And as a result, our cabinet will not be including Customs Department into the Barbados Revenue Authority. We hope that that will bring certainty and stability now to the arrangements that have undermined the effectiveness of that department over the course of the last 3 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, corporation taxes. In order to restore parity between income and corporation tax, sir, we will raise the highest corporation tax from 25% to 30%. This will be effective from July 1st, and this from October 1st, and this will raise $57 million in a full year. Value-added tax. Mr. Speaker, sir, a large number of Barbadians now engage in online transactions for both goods and services, be it Amazon, eBay, or Netflix. I do. We currently do not pay VAT on these transactions. I'm advised that the technology now exists for us to capture these transactions for the purpose of taxation. I therefore today announce the intention of my government that effective October 1st, 2018, we intend to make all online transactions for the purchase of goods and services by Barbadian residents subject to the value-added tax. If the product is used in Barbados or delivered to Barbados, then local or otherwise, it will be captured. If the product is delivered to Barbados, it will also be captured. There will be a full explanatory note and full legislation put in place so that all may be aware of how this will affect them in the near future, and that is why its effective date of execution is not until the 1st of October 2018. Mr. Speaker, sir, health service contribution. Given the demographics of the Barbados population, where there's a higher number of elderly persons than persons entering the workforce, and given the significant increase that we all know in the incidence of chronic non-communicable diseases, the cost of public health care continues to rise at an unsustainable rate. We, sir, have to complete the appropriate review of all the relevant studies, including those completed by the last government, which were not shared with us fully, and which within 2 weeks we have been unable to do in as appropriate a time, in spite of us working full steam ahead, and I apologize to the country for not being able to complete that. As a result, we will not be in a position to settle the sustainable long-term financing of our healthcare system, we believe, until phase 3 of our plan, since it requires comprehensive consultation. In the interim, we will, sir, raise a 2.5% health service contribution to be collected by the National Insurance Board. 1.5% of insurable earnings will be paid by employers, and 1% of insurable earnings will be paid by employees and self-employed persons. These measures will come into effect on October 1st and is expected to raise $50 million it's $45 million, sir, in a full fiscal year, and $22.5 million for the balance of this fiscal year. This will meet more than 25% of the budget of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and we will make amendments to the appropriate legislation, as I indicated to you earlier, to ensure that the National Insurance Board may forward the collected funds to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital directly for the purpose for which it has been collected. What a departure from the NSRL. Mr. Speaker, sir, as it stands today, the Barbados government pays fully for the collective marketing and product development, the collective one I speak to, of our tourism sector. Individual hotels may do some of their own. The budget which we apply to these functions for this fiscal year on average has been $96 million. As I said to you earlier, sir, it is our contention that given the maturity of Barbados' tourism sector, the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and the Barbados Tourism Product Inc. are ready to transition into a public-private partnership. The Government of Barbados will accordingly review the governance arrangements so as to ensure a transfer of lead responsibility to the private sector for the ownership and management of these entities. It will, however, still be a partnership because the government will retain a minority shareholding and a golden share in the interest of ensuring fairness and equity to all players within that sector. It is anticipated that this transition will take place between now and the 1st of October. In order to facilitate the new institutional arrangements, governance arrangements, I should say, it is intended to isolate the revenue that will be necessary to manage these institutions in their early years. Accordingly, my government has decided from the 1st of October 2018 to introduce an airline travel and tourism development fee. This fee will be paid by passengers flying outside of CARICOM, or the fee that will be paid by passengers flying outside of CARICOM will be $70 United States currency, and for those within CARICOM will be $35 United States currency. This fee will be added to the departure tax now payable. May I say, sir, that it is anticipated that this measure in a full fiscal year will realize $95 million. $75 million of this amount will go towards the BTMI and the BTPI, and we are assured by members of the social partnership that this $75 million can allow them to do as good or better a job in the marketing of Barbados' tourism. Similarly, sir, $20 million remaining will go to central government towards the further regulation of our tourism product, civil aviation, and our shareholder responsibilities as the major shareholder, but not majority shareholder, in LIAC. Sir, for those who may be worried, may I remind persons that in St. Lucia, they raised their fee cumulatively at the airport through similar taxes to a combined amount of $100 US, and in spite of that, they saw not a reduction in travel, but an 11% growth in tourism in that jurisdiction. I am also told that there are at least 3 other Caribbean countries whose departure tax and other combined fees are at a similar rate. This airport airline travel and tourism development fee is expected that we will work to have this collected and made as part of the ticket tax, and hence the timeline to be able to be appropriately sensitize the market and to negotiate for its inclusion in the ticket fee rather than separate collection. But if necessary, it will be collected at the Grantley Adams International Airport. And this will apply to all tickets ticketed after the 1st of October. And this is an important distinction for the travel industry, because we recognize that there are some people who would already have been ticketed even though they may be traveling after the 1st of October. Let us be clear as to how this will be executed. I want to thank the members of the tourism sector for the consultations that have allowed us to be able to settle on these measures and for them to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Barbados as we move to lift this country from the brink of where it stands today. Thank you. Similarly, I thank them for the next initiative, which is the room rate levy. As I indicated, sir, earlier, 3 times our population visits our nation every year. Indeed, many of them are like family. I believe Barbados has the highest repeat visitor factor in the hemisphere, and we welcome them. We are satisfied that many of them are willing to make a small contribution to the cost of maintaining our infrastructure. They too, like us, do not like to see sewage on the street. They too, like us, do not like to see garbage on the roads. They too were told, because it wasn't told to Barbadians, it was told to them, that potholes are transitory inconvenience at a cocktail reception to repeat visitors. Mr. Speaker, it is our view that the current rate which hotels charge for VAT at 7.5% cannot remain. It is my government's view that the fair share of the burden of adjustment requires a review of this rate and that we place it at 15% VAT for the accommodation sector. We, however, accept from the tourism sector that to introduce this rate without a sufficient lead period will cause harm to our hotel sector because of them being locked into contractual arrangements for some time now. In our discussions with the social partnership, we have agreed that any such rate adjustment should be applicable only from the 1st of January 2020. This will provide more than adequate notice for them to plan and adjust their contractual and marketing efforts accordingly. In the interim, Mr. Speaker, my government will introduce a room levy to be applied to our hotel rooms as follows. 1. B-class and apartments, $2.50 US currency per room per night. A-class, $5.50 US currency per room per night. Luxury class, $10 US per room per night. Mr. Speaker, sir, we thank them for allowing us to be able to have this modest contribution, which, however, will yield almost $45 million to the Treasury of Barbados in a full fiscal year. In addition, sir, there will be a 2.5% product levy on all direct tourism services. This will be collected on government's behalf by the providers of these services, and we believe that the appropriate tourism entities, the Barbados Hotel Tourism Authority, will continue to work closely with the Ministry of Tourism to ensure a seamless introduction of this levy from July 1st. The room levy also starts from July 1st. Mr. Speaker, there is one gaping omission in the collection of revenue from our tourism product, and we thank all for allowing us to determine how best we can close and treat to it. This relates to the shared accommodation sector, sir, namely Airbnb, HomeAway, and all other similar types of shared accommodation. While we welcome its contribution to our economy and its ability to lift the earnings of our citizens, we recognize that it must also play its fair share, carry its fair share of the burden. Sir, we are aware that the technology now exists, as I said, for us to collect Barbados taxes on many of these online transactions, but we also have commissioned the Ministry of Tourism to speak to many of these shared accommodation sectors. Accordingly, we will introduce from October 1st, a 10% shared accommodation levy on all fees charged for the shared accommodation sector. It should be noted that this sector does not generally, the majority of persons in this sector may not pay VAT on accommodation services, and it is our belief that most providers fall below the threshold for VAT. Hence, we believe this 10% levy to be the fairest solution. It is anticipated that these measures, as I said, will raise as follows: Room rate levy, I'm sorry, I said $45 million, is $47 million. DTS product levy, $3.9 million. And the shared accommodation levy, $8 million, bringing a total, Mr. Speaker, of $58.9 million from the tourism sector. We thank you. Mr. Speaker, this will allow all of us to share, as I said, in bringing Barbados back to safety. I've already addressed, sir, our international business sector being under threat from active pressure by the OECD and neglect, I dare say, from the previous government. I will champion and defend the industry, sir, because it has played too pivotal a role in our history. It is the international business sector that has allowed us to embark on the most aggressive forms of tax reform in our history because of the manner in which it contributed to our corporation taxes in the past. I will support the private sector's task force along with my Minister of International Business with their recommendations, which we expect to receive by the end of July this year. In return, we are working on ways in which the industry may make a greater contribution and financial impact to Barbados as we go through this period of structural adjustment. Given the uncertainty surrounded, as I said, we will hold any such announcement, but hope to do so before the 1st of October. Having said that, sir, we are aware that we will have an improved performance, and that is one bit of good news, in our corporation taxes as a result of the re-domiciling of many companies from the United Kingdom as a result of something called the hybrid mismatch rules. Only accountants could come up with that name. Our investigation, sir, suggests that this activity is likely to result in an increased tax revenue over a full year of approximately $60 million to our corporation tax. Better to be born lucky than to be born rich. All ministries, sir, and statutory corporations will be required to identify new revenue streams and to review existing fee structures and business models. That is what Phase 2 must bring. It will allow us to enhance our revenue earning capacity with respect to those user fees in those areas where fees have not been increased for decades. And I put the country on alert. The Corporate Affairs Registry has been charging the same fees since I became a lawyer in 1988. That is 30 years ago. The Supreme Court equally has been charging the same fees for decades. There must now be a comprehensive review of user fees across this country so that persons can help bear their fair share of the burden if we are to save the quality of life and to protect us from damage with respect to the value of our dollar. Combining these revenue measures, sir, including the abolition of the NSRL and the road tax, which we net out, will still raise approximately $303 million in a full fiscal year. We have more, sir, than fully funded the abolition of the NSRL and the road tax, and we have done so only partly through taxes on Barbadians. We have shared the burden beyond Barbadians, and as a result, we believe that it will not have the deleterious impact on economic growth that it would otherwise have had if we sought to extract that same scale of taxation and fees from only the Barbadian population. Expenditure measures, sir. I now turn to some expenditure measures as anticipated in the press statement that we have, sir, to increase expenditures in a few areas. Over the past 10 years, sir, the workers of Barbados have played a major role in bearing the brunt of the economic challenges currently besetting us. So I remember the dates like if they were yesterday. August 13th, 2013, when the government first announced the 19-month fiscal adjustment strategy. I remember December 13th, the Friday, when they came here on the same day that they did the new Electricity Act. The Minister of Finance stood down there on this bench and announced that the numbers that he would have to send home were no longer those paltry numbers that he announced on the 13th of August, but now 5,000 and those by attrition as well over a 5-year period. Mr. Speaker, it was less than months after they had gone to the electorate and said no layoffs, no sell-offs, no fees at the University of the West Indies. It shall come to be characterized in the history of this country as the greatest betrayal of the Barbadian people. I have no doubt that the historic mandate that my government has received has been in large measure also a result of Barbadians repaying the favor of that great betrayal. The workers have carried that brunt. Immediately on taking office, on the 25th of May, I mandated that meetings be held with the workers' representatives to consider a new wages and salaries accord for public workers who have not had a wage increase in this country for 8 straight years. Prices have gone up in the last decade by almost 50%, and the mega increase that they got between 2008 to 2010 does not even bring them to a proper quarter of what prices have gone up to in this country. Labour representatives, sir, and government have literally worked without rest as part of the social partnership and separately in these negotiations. Today, I have the honour, sir, to report that together we have agreed on a way forward. Any union demand, I must tell you, however, for settlement regarding previous periods is not in the best interest of Barbados. And I wish that I would have been in a position to satisfy and to make up for those lost years that the previous government put you to at peril by not agreeing to any form of wage increase between 2010 and 2018. However, I can deal with where I am today, and I have agreed to recommend to my cabinet, who has agreed this morning, that the agreement reached between the Ministry of Civil Service and indeed the public service unions of Barbados, all of them collectively, of 5% across the board, an increase in wages and salaries shall become applicable for the period April 1st, 2013 to March 31st, 2019. The cost of this agreement will be $60 million on a recurring basis. This applies, and this cost applies not just to central government, but also to statutory boards. I said 2013, I meant 19. I'm so sorry. That's what happens when you don't sleep. Period April 1st, 2018 to March 31st, 2019. As I said, it will cost the government $60 million. This is by far the biggest single expenditure that my government will undertake in the next year. It represents our commitment to labor. It represents our commitment to the workers of Barbados, Mr. Speaker. It is an appreciation of their unflinching commitment to working through the challenges that our country faces together. And I want to salute their maturity. And I say simply that those who would seek to make a mockery of their patriotism would do well to go back and check themselves again, because this is what is in the best interest of the country, recognizing that if we have to set off on a long journey, you have to give people breakfast, especially if they have not eaten for 8 years. That last statement, Mr. Speaker, sir, could equally apply to this next measure. I said at Wharton, sir, give me the vote and watch me. Mr. Speaker, sir, you gave me the vote, now watch me. As promised in our manifesto, sir, We today now confirm that we will raise the minimum non-contributory pensions from $155 to $225 per week as of July. Protection of our pensioners will cost the sum of $18 million. The relativity, sir, will also be maintained for minimum contributory pensions and survivor benefits and invalidity benefits within the National Insurance Scheme. And the National Insurance Scheme will treat to this expenditure separately. Mr. Speaker, you will soon recognize why we gave this scale of increase in a very short moment. We know that the measures announced today, sir, will impact all. Some people will need extra support, and as such, sir, I announce today a temporary increase in our welfare and poverty alleviation votes to the tune of $5 million to be able to capture and support all who may fall through the cracks. This is a small amount, but we have to start somewhere, and we hope in conjunction with civil society and our churches that we can provide the safety net for our people. Mr. Speaker, sir, I said on the 14th of August 2013, I tell you these dates are etched in my mind because of the emotion that they raised in me at the time. On the 14th of August 2013, sir, I promised this country that the party which I lead would not leave our young people behind and would not abandon them to the deserts of the rest of their life. We will undertake undergraduate tuition fees for those attending the University of the West Indies with effect from the next semester. We will also put in place, sir, a regime that follows the regime that we adhered to in 1995 with respect to postgraduate qualifications, that those receiving upper second class honors or higher, or those wanting to do a course of study that is a national development priority, we will pay for them at postgraduate level. We will cap them for the period of time of their study plus 1 year. But in return, sir, we now today say to them that this commitment to you is being given at a time of great difficulty for your country, and we will require of you a minimum of 100 hours in approved service to your country by a schedule that will be settled in conjunction with the social partnership as to the areas of activity that our students will be required to give back to Barbadians. Mr. Speaker, sir, we believe that this will help us maintain the social capital of our country, and some clear ideas that I will put on the table for the consideration of the social partnership in its broader construction when we establish the Social Justice Committee, as has been the mission deputed to the Honourable Minister of Labour, the member for St. Peter, will be, for example, mentoring many of our young children in primary schools, ensuring that they participate in traditional activities like guides, like Boy Scouts, like cricket, football, road tennis. Too many of our young people are left loitering on the corners of communities without structured activity to engage them. We must reverse this from our landscapes. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, in keeping with our manifesto, and I must tell you that this for me is a historic one. We are committed to introducing the Trust Loan Program, where we will offer up to $5,000 loans, up to $5,000 loans on the first loan to those entrepreneurs without collateral on presentation of a viable basic expenditure plan. Many a night in the campaign across this country, I spoke to this plan because it is not only based on your single commitment to the repayment of the plan, but we believe that we can learn from the systems that inform SUSUs and meeting plans in the past, where the related trust factor by putting people together in groups of 7 and 8 will require them to be able to work with one another in the same way that if a person misses out on a meeting turn, the whole meeting turn is exploded. And I've asked the Honourable Minister of Commerce, the member for St. George South, to ensure that in the design of this program, that which is intrinsically Barbadian and that which has kept many a Barbadian family above the water for the last 150 years be included in the design of this program. We believe in our people, and if we can write off tax concessions for people every year to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, then the government of Barbados will find $10 million every year to put in ordinary Barbadians who are marginalized by the financial system. Mr. Speaker, sir, our children are the nation's lifeblood, and we must take steps to improve their safety at school, on school buses and at bus stops. This includes the hiring of school safety officers, social workers, and guidance counselors. Given financial pressures, we cannot do this across all 21 schools to start. I wish we could, but our fiscal realities do not admit of it. We will therefore start initially in 7 schools. In addition, we will introduce a new designation of master teacher so that we may allow our best teachers to remain in teaching and be compensated in so doing. The same applies to our nurses. We will create senior specialist nurses to ensure that our best nurses do not have to be promoted into administration to be paid well. These small but vital initiatives in education and among teaching and nursing professionals, and we will also include, I believe, the nursing practitioner, as requested by one of our social partners. These will cost approximately $6 million. Mr. Speaker, so I don't know when last you visited the Accident and Emergency Department in our country's Lone Hospital. But if you have visited it recently, you, like me, would know that the situation cannot continue there. And you, like me, would know that we cannot, in a country that is aspiring to be a developed country, be satisfied with persons on beds in the corridor awaiting treatment, or persons who have nowhere to sit or go in the waiting room. It will not happen under this government. The same way others found money for large buildings to be built and kept closed for 2 years for tiles to be burst, we now find time to give $10 million to the accident and $11 million, sorry, sir, to the Accident and Emergency Department for expansion, both physically in terms of additional constructed area for triage and waiting areas, and secondly, for the equipment necessary to be able to properly accommodate those who depend purely on that department because they have no other option and cannot afford private medical care. They too are people, and they must be treated with dignity. And we say that once that lounge is finished, it must go out for public tender for somebody to manage it properly as a hospitality lounge so that the loved ones of our patients have the best possible care and ambience while waiting in these nervous times to find out what is wrong with their family. Similarly, we now announce, sir, the extended opening hours of 2 polyclinics for 24 hours per day on a 24-hour basis. The time of opening will depend on the completion of the additional staff that has to be deployed, but that will cost the taxpayers approximately $3 million a year, and this will apply to the Randall Phillips Polyclinic and the Sir Winston Scott Polyclinic. This will take pressure off of accident and emergency. Mr. Speaker, sir, Barbados has a backlog of 10,000 criminal cases. How does a country, sir, and you know it from your practice, how does a country this size have a backlog of 10,000 criminal cases? It is absurd. We believe that to even admit that it can continue is to make a mockery of ourselves. And therefore, accordingly, sir, The Attorney General has made a case, and I have accepted his case, that a society which prides itself on fairness and efficiency must move swiftly now to deal with this situation. We will therefore appoint 3 temporary judges to move to eliminate this backlog. This measure, sir, with the attendant offices, will cost $700,000 to the Treasury per year. With respect to our sugar farmers, sir, you know, the irony is, sir, that if ever there was a chance for the sugar industry to have a bright future, it is actually now. And therefore, our government is committed to sitting and meeting with the people in the sugarcane industry, recognizing that if Barbados is to have an environmentally sound landscape, ecologically sound landscape, and if we are to preserve our rural society, we need to resolve the future of the sugarcane industry as a matter of urgency. I have every confidence in my Minister of Agriculture, the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, to bring us to safety there too. In the circumstances, however, it has been brought to my attention that the government of Barbados owes the sugar farmers $14.5 million. Time spent in agriculture cannot be put off because every season has its own rhythms. And if we do not make money available to the farmers, we may find ourselves moving out of production. And I am told that when a field comes out of production, it takes 5 to 7 years to be brought back into production. In addition, we cannot seriously move towards a state of food security if we are not prepared, Mr. Speaker, to allow for a rotation between our crops and indeed our cane crop or any other grass crop that will help balance the nutrients in our soils. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, my government will seek to settle this matter over the next 3 years of the indebtedness of $14.5 million, but we will immediately provide in this financial year as partial settlement a sum of $5 million to be able to allow the sugarcane farmers to make sure that we can sustain this industry. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've already indicated that BTMI and BTPI removing from the budget will save us $96 million. I've told you the deadline is October 1st. With respect to the Sanitation Services Authority, which I mentioned earlier, this too will be removed from the budget, but not by becoming a public-private entity. It will remain a public statutory corporation. There will, however, be a new garbage and sewage contribution to be levied through the Barbados Water Authority bills as of August 1st. This will be buttressed by an agreement between the Sanitation Services Authority, and the Attorney General has advised me that we may want to support this by legislation as well. Households, Mr. Speaker, will pay the equivalent of $1.50 per day for the collection for this garbage and sewage contribution. Of that $1.50, $1.25 will go to the Sanitation Services Authority for the offsetting of its expenditure in garbage collection, and 25 cents will be retained by the Barbados Water Authority towards the maintenance of the contribution towards the maintenance of our sewage systems. In the case of commercial entities, their contribution will be 50% of their water bill, with half of that amount going to the Sanitation Services Authority towards the garbage collection, and the other half remaining with the Barbados Water Authority to offset the costs, the operational costs of the sewage systems. Mr. Speaker, sir, listen to me carefully. It is our view that it is unfair, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, sir, but it is unfair for one group of people in this country to pay sewage fees, as has been happening for years on the South Coast and in Bridgetown. They pay sewage connection fees. The commercial businesses in Bridgetown and on the South Coast pay a sewage connection fee of 2/3 of their water bill, and residents pay 1/3 of their water bill as a sewage connection fee. This country is not isolated such that only those on the South Coast or those in Bridgetown suffer from the collapse of our sewage systems. All Barbadians suffer from the collapse of our sewage system. All Barbadians suffer when our public health is threatened by the failure to collect garbage and by mosquito-borne diseases that may develop. I know well what it is like to have chikungunya. It is the worst thing that has happened to me. And every time I get tired, the pains come back, even though I had chikungunya 5 years ago. We have seen a decline in the travel of certain demographics within our tourism sector in the last 3 years because of the incidence of Zika and its related consequences to women of childbearing age. This is not a joke either for Barbadians, or is it a joke for those who visit our country. We feel, Mr. Speaker, that it is necessary for us to review the fee paid by the customers, residential and commercial, the sewage fee currently within the South Coast and Bridgetown, and after review, we will determine for the country how best. But in the context of the new fees that I've just announced, it is my own personal position that they ought to go. But in the absence of appropriate consultation with the social partnership, I am not prepared to announce it here today. These measures, sir, these collections, will lead to a budget savings of $65 million, which is what the Sanitation Services Authority needs for a full year to operate. Because of this, we have the confidence that our Sanitation Services Authority can move forward with the clear understanding that the measures that I will soon announce will allow them to play its proper role in the maintenance of a clean Barbados. I mentioned earlier, sir, that we will allocate the sum of $2 million to strengthen revenue collection capacity within Customs and within the Barbados Revenue Authority and the compliance units, sir. If we want to enhance our revenue, we need to make sure that somebody comes to work every day to get the job done. Mr. Speaker, sir, those who have a greater capacity are paying more across all of our measures. But everyone has a role to play, and everyone is called to the rescue. May I say, sir, before I forget, that in respect of the garbage and sewage contribution, all pensioners living alone will pay 50% of the fee. 75 cents a day instead of $1.50 per day. And you now begin to see, sir, why the minimum non-contributory pension was placed where it was placed, in order to ensure that even after the payment of this fee, that they are capable of living a dignified existence in this country. Sir, none of these measures are by accident, because we understood what mission lay ahead of us even before we were given the benefit of the mandate by the people of Barbados. Similarly, all families that are indigent and fall below the poverty line will be assessed by the Welfare Department as to whether they too will be entitled to a 50% rebate of the garbage and sewage contribution. This is a fair government, Mr. Speaker. In sum, even after we deliver on our manifesto promises for mission-critical matters, some of which I've just described to you, to ease the burden of those Barbadians who are vulnerable, those who have had no wage increases for 8 years, those who need to be empowered, there is still a reduction in our recurrent expenditure, Mr. Speaker. There is still a reduction in our recurrent expenditure after bringing to book all of these measures that I just announced in terms of expenditure. There is a reduction of $23 million given the user fees that will see the relevant statutory corporations removed from the finance and out of the consolidated fund. We have tried to be creative in the way in which we fix our country's problems without sacrificing our people on the front line of adjustment. Our current revenue and expenditure measures will reduce the deficit by $183 million over the next 12 months. Our primary surplus will rise from an estimated 4% to 6%, and along with our debt restructuring, we hope that this will bring us to a fiscal surplus. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have reduced the economic impact of these measures in two ways. First, sir, we have broadened the tax base so that approximately $200 million of the revenue increases come from taxes on non-residents through the Airline Development and Tourism Development duty fee. Higher taxes will eventually come from IBCs and room and product development levies. This is not costless, as higher taxes may impact our competitiveness, and we are conscious of this and will work with them to reduce that. But we do not believe that these sectors compete on price alone, but on quality. If Barbados cannot solve its sewage problems, all sectors are affected with respect to their competitiveness. If we have infrastructure that cannot be fixed, we will affect the competitiveness of these sectors. And that is why, sir, we feel the need to spend funds on our infrastructure, because by so doing we will safeguard our responsibility for quality that has been so endangered by the last government's neglect of the sewage and, in more recent times, sargassum crises and failure to treat with public workers. As a result, sir, we now have a $131.5 million capital expenditure program that is led by investment in, first and foremost, fixing the South Coast and the Bridgetown sewage plants. Mr. Speaker, sir, the immediate remedial work for the South Coast sewage project has been estimated at $15 million, and for the Bridgetown plant at $12 million. Both are on the way. When I leave here today, sir, we go to receive results on certain tests that are being done on the South Coast, and I have a ministerial subcommittee that meets 3 times a week under the leadership of Minister A, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, Minister for Environment, and equally, sir, there has already been significant work done at the Bridgetown plant in the last week pursuant to Cabinet's mandate that was given week before last. In addition, sir, I am grateful to announce to the country that the Vice President of the Canadian Crown Corporation has flown in the country, and this afternoon myself and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Environment will be meeting with them, and our primary interest is the discussion of the long-term renewal of the South Coast sewage plant and any further upgrades for Bridgetown, because Barbados cannot be left hostage to the unfortunate and unreliable workings of an aged plant that has brought us literally to this sorry point. We also, sir, critically need to repair and buy new garbage trucks, public buses, and purchase equipment for the Ministry of Public Works. If you know what we have found, you would cry. Barbados starts each day with about 15 garbage trucks, and the SSA has advised that they end each day with about 7 or 8, because every day 7 or 8 garbage trucks break down, Mr. Speaker. We need a minimum of 35 garbage trucks to service this country on a daily basis. This situation is untenable. We will seek immediately to acquire 15 second-hand trucks within the next 6 to 8 weeks out of Europe, because the timeline for the delivery of new trucks, sir, is 8 months. We cannot continue with this situation for 8 months. And indeed, this is not a speculative timeline. The last government committed to the purchase of 7 vehicles in April and will not be delivered until November of this year. 7 vehicles will not come close to closing the gap. And the spectacle of open back trucks carrying garbage is not consistent with the Barbados that we Bajans know and want, or those who visit our shores know or want. Accordingly, sir, they will also, sir, be given an amount to complete the purchase of a D9 tractor and a compactor for just under $3 million, bringing the total that the SSA will be given to $15 million to pursue these urgent acquisitions. May I say, sir, that this acquisition of the tractor and a compactor is absolutely critical, because the SSA, the Sanitation Services Authority, has been paying the princely sum of approximately $33,000 per week for the rental of a D9 and a compactor for these 2 pieces of equipment for over 4.5 years, a period of time that would have allowed them to buy at least 3 of each piece of those 2 pieces of equipment. It is scandalous to say the least. Yes, sir. I do not need, sir, also to remind Barbadians that there are not enough buses on the road. You know it, I know it, we feel it every day. And Mr. Speaker, the discussion we are having today is not for a $5 bus fare, as some would want the country to believe, but the need to give Barbadians a regular and reliable bus service in this country. And sir, while we cannot renew the entire fleet at once, because the number of available buses have dropped to an unacceptably low level, my government has allocated the sum of $25 million in capital expenditure today for the purchase and repair of buses. It is anticipated that the member for Christchurch West will ensure that all new buses to be acquired should either be electric or use clean energy, and also be able to accommodate those who are differently able in our society. We simply cannot be planning out a new Barbados based on modalities that run counter to our aim to protect those who are most vulnerable, and not to be able to accord with our opportunity to have a fossil fuel-free economy by 2030. Mr. Speaker, sir, we anticipate that the Minister will keep Barbadians updated on progress with this, in respect of this matter. Sir, the same Minister has the unfortunate legacy now that he has inherited, that almost 2/3 of the 600 workers at MTW have not been able to do much when the day comes for a very long time. And it is because, through no fault of their own, there has been no functioning equipment at the Ministry of Public Works. Mr. Speaker, how does a country that will reach where Barbados reach be reduced to these levels? How does it? For the simple sum of $10 million, we can get those workers at the Ministry of Public Works back to work. We can start to deal with the fact that they can, with additional sums that I will announce for the development of roads in a conjunction with private contractors, in direction of the Ministry of Public Works and the Ministry of National Beautification, beautify, debush and beautify the country, deal with drainage, deal with sidewalks, deal with all of the other things that affect ordinary Barbadian communities and those who ply the highways of this country. $10 million is all that is required to get the equipment needs of the Ministry of Public Works back to deploy their workers fully. Sir, well, Barbadians have equally been complaining about the poor state of the roads in the country and the increased cost of purchasing tires and shocks for their vehicles. We all know, sir, except for one person, that potholes are not a transitory inconvenience. They are, sir, a permanent hole in your pocket. Therefore, sir, my government will embark, in addition to the amounts already voted for road repairs through the IDB and CAF, will embark on an additional essential road repair program and debushing program that will cost $25 million. This will be in conjunction with the equipment that we just spoke about. And sir, a matter of which I am truly passionate, there are still approximately 5,000 pit toilets in Barbados. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody has a pit toilet by choice in this country. My government, therefore, believes that as we come to the third decade of the 21st century, it is imperative that we commence a program to eradicate this scourge from our landscape over the next 7 years, if it is our lot to be given beyond the period of time of 5 years, because that is how long we feel it will take. $10 million in this budgetary proposal will only get us going. But the truth is that the Ministry of Economic Affairs under the Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, has been commandeered to help find an appropriate concessional loan to undertake this activity, because Barbadians deserve better and must receive priority of place from its government on those basic, essential matters that define who we are as a human being. I cannot contemplate what it must be like for an elderly person to go outside in the middle of a night when it is raining purely because nature calls upon them. Sir, I'm coming close to the end. Our aim is to make ourselves more climate resilient, sir, in this hurricane season as well and beyond. We have to make sure we are ready for it, and we need to make sure that the Minister of Home Affairs can appropriately get the country ready for any eventuality, given what transpired in the region last year. This will cost the country, sir, a further $5 million, and it will range from the repairs to urgent buildings, water tanks for some schools, because the Honourable Minister of Education, the member for St. Michael South East, has already had to close a number of schools in the 2 weeks that she has been a minister because of the absence of water tanks. God forbid what will happen if there's an emergency in this island, far less. So that sum will be $5 million. In addition, sir, you've already heard me speak about the improvements to bring down the temporary backlog of cases. But when we appoint 3 temporary judges, they need somewhere to go, and not at high rental rates because a Supreme Court building has not been properly maintained. My government will allocate the sum of $2.5 million that we are advised is required to remedy this unacceptable situation such that residents of Barbados can once again fully access our justice system. Mr. Speaker, there is no clearer sign of the neglect of the people by the previous DLP administration than its refusal to address the problems associated with faulty electrical wiring in a number of NHC housing units across the country. Pronouncements were made as to the delivery of title deeds, even though many still have not yet received the same. But whether you live in Haynesville, Silver Hill, or Wotton, the fear of losing one's possession, or worse still, one's life, is the dreaded reality of everyday life for thousands of Barbadians in these housing areas. This government will start to address these issues by first allocating $2 million for urgent electrical upgrades to ease the fears of all Barbadians. And Mr. Speaker, sir, amidst all of the gloom that there may be around us, we must never lose sight of our ambitions of where we want to go. Our aspirations must never be tempered as a result of poor decisions. We must transform Barbados such that our people, particularly our young people, can engage the world with confidence. Therefore, sir, even now while we embark on do all of this, we will embark on making our capital city a smart bridge town by investing in an initiative to provide free Wi-Fi for all those living and doing business within the greater Bridgetown area. $2 million will be allocated to this process. Mr. Speaker, we believe that this will be a precursor, I hope, to what we will have the honor of announcing as a smart Barbados. The overall fiscal position, sir, will improve considerably compared to the pre-administration budget. Total revenue for the fiscal year 2018-2019 is estimated at $3.28 billion, or 32% of GDP. Recurring expenditure, sir, is estimated now at $3 billion and $20 million, sir, or 29.4% of GDP. Remember, sir, I said a net reduction in expenditure of $23 million on a recurring basis. While capital expenditure is estimated at $400 million, or 3.9% of GDP. This gives us, sir, an overall fiscal deficit of $140 million, or 1.4% of GDP now. Let me point out, sir, that this does not yet include any savings that we may achieve from the debt restructuring exercise that is currently underway. But lest we forget, we still carry $1.8 billion in arrears that we must now seek to move to and settle to get ourselves out of this hole. When interest savings, sir, from the debt restructuring is also added, we are likely to have no fund requirement, we hope, for next year, but we await the outcome of those discussions. We need to get out of this hole, and we need to see a future. And we need to do so in a shared way. I hope that all listening to our us today will realize that everybody is being asked to carry a piece of the burden, with the exception of the international business sector, who has committed that it will carry its piece in the very near future once its report is in. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan is carefully balanced. The expenditures in our public infrastructure should not be seen as a cost, but as an investment to secure a higher GDP. And we are grateful for the language of the International Monetary Fund in its wrap-up report as it relates to the need for us to deal with critical infrastructure issues. We cannot have a country going forward with no garbage trucks, bush, no sewage on the streets, no buses, a Supreme Court of all things not functioning with people being able to work in it, schools shutting down on a regular basis every week, a horror story. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reduction of the fiscal deficit in a full fiscal year of $183 million, raising the primary surplus, as I said, from 4 to 6, almost 6%. When we add the results of debt restructuring, sir, we believe that we can still reduce our debt to sustainable levels in 5 years. Yet, this protects the most vulnerable in our society. We do not want to come back to this place. We've also, sir, held faithful to our campaign promises. And this budget brings us to fiscal balance from this year, but it does not extinguish the potential for growth. Growth is supported through shifting the balance of revenue increases to the overseas sector, in our view, and a fundamental reorientation of our economic policy away from tax and spend to providing the space to transform our economy into a green economy. Mr. Speaker, sir, my team and I have shepherded this plan, but it is the people's plan. I repeat, it is the people's plan. It is a plan that emerged from deep discussions at the social partnership, reborn and revitalized, I hope. And I commit to them to continued engagement twice a month for the period of structural adjustment over the course of the next 3 years. It is a plan of broad solidarity, I repeat. It is a plan that, I said earlier, profits from something uniquely Barbadian that restores our pride and industry. It is a fearless plan. It is a fearless plan. I want to thank the members of the social partnership, truly, for their love of country, for their commitment, for their selflessness. And as I said earlier, I'm humbled to lead this country at this defining moment, when despite our trials, Barbadians can still find the will and the strength to pull together in this, our greatest hour of need. My government is aware, truly, that these measures will impact on all Barbadians, and those who visit or do business here. But let us not forget that it is the social compact that we are seeking to safeguard by asking you to share in this sacrifice, in this adjustment. Mr. Speaker, we will take care of our people's children. We will take care of the emergency and the basic health care needs of our people's families. We will take care of the roads, the gullies, and the beaches. We will work with you to move the sargassum. We will work with you to protect you, to give you safety, to protect your public health. But, Mr. Speaker, we can't do it all alone. We really can't. We need help. And we need all Barbadians and all who want to be Barbadian by choice or want to associate with this country by choice. We need all aboard for love of country. Just as our grandparents and our great-grandparents faced great trials and tribulations and rose above them, I say to you, sir, so too shall we, because we will do it together. In the next 48 hours, sir, I'm conscious the world will watch to see how our compatriots respond to this call to national duty. Our brothers and sisters in the islands of the Eastern Caribbean and the wider Caribbean, I can tell you, are rooting for us. They too would like to see a restoration of the Barbados brand, because recovery in Barbados brings new opportunities, vigor, and vitality to the wider Caribbean. I shook my head a few days ago, sir, when it was suggested that the only persons resident in Barbados felt and experienced the pain and shame of the last 10 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am here to say to them through you, sir, that the entire world felt and experienced the shame of a decaying Barbados brand. You don't have to be Barbadian to love Barbados. The navel strings of some of our greatest patriots were not buried here, sir. But Barbados is the land they loved. And like us, they shook their heads in total bewilderment by what became of this beautiful country, especially under the last dispensation. Wherever you went in the region and around the world in the last 8 years, the constant refrain was, but what happened to beautiful Barbados? What's happening? I am here to say to all and sundry this morning, sir, that the bleeding has stopped. The patient, yes, is now in intensive care. But, sir, the prognosis for recovery is very good. The conclusion I drew from the results of May 24th is that no longer shall Barbadians remain passive observers to the decay of this fair land. No longer shall we take comfort in the fact that what's happening here is happening elsewhere. As of May 24th, sir, we have set minimum standards. The Barbados brand may be broken, but together we shall fix it. As proud Barbadians, it behoves us all to stand and be counted in this our country's hour of greatest need. I say the time for finger pointing is behind us. After today, I say so. The jury returned its verdict on May 24th, and the accused was duly convicted. It is now time for each and every one of us to roll up our shirt sleeves, bend our backs, and put our hands to the wheel. Barbados has got to be rescued, and it has got to be rescued with Barbadians leading the charge. Thank you, social partners. That is why I've sent a clear message in this presentation this morning that each and every Barbadian shall play their part in the rescue, recovery, and rebuild exercise. We have set up an email, Mr. Speaker, for persons wanting to share their ideas with this government, because we do not believe that we are omnipotent or omniscient. We do not believe that we are all-powerful or that we know everything. The address through you, sir, is ideas number 4, ideas for Barbados at barbados.gov.bb, and I shall ensure that this is circulated by the Government Information Service and through social media. Everyone who loves Barbados and who cares about this fair land and wishes it well will be called upon to play some small part in its rescue and recovery. And that is why, sir, we have invited visitors to the island to contribute to the rebuilding exercise. That is why we've asked the international creditors to hold strain for a little while. That is why we've involved persons at the highest level of the IFIs to walk the mile with us. That is why, sir, today I want to call upon Barbadians living in every corner of the earth to stand and proclaim with confidence, in the language used by the member for St. Philip West when he returned in 1994, Barbados is back. We turned the vehicle around on May 24th. Today, to use another analogy, we placed it in the service bay and we have done the diagnostics. Pretty bad prognosis, but salvageable nevertheless. Fuel up, move forward, move from reverse mode to four-wheel drive. We are embarking, as we said. Mr. Speaker, we ask today simply that people contribute based on their means, that's all, on their means. If you work for a little, we ask you to contribute a little. If you drive a small fuel-efficient car, you can pay less than a person with an 8-cylinder big ride. With this package, you can pace yourself. If things get a little tight and you can't afford to buy the gasoline, you can choose to carpool, but you couldn't choose not to eat with NSRL choking you. Mr. Speaker, our seniors work hard to build this land, and it was said that we could not accommodate them this time round. I asked you to watch me, to vote for me and watch me. We brought them at the top today. I tell you, there must be a basic minimum below which this country is not allowed to fall below or beneath. I am optimistic about our future because once again we can aim to produce a graduate in each household after today. Tuition fees being removed from the backs of those who can't afford it. To that we now add an entrepreneur in each home. Yes, there is sacrifice, but we cannot promise to serve an omelette down the road if we refuse at this time to crack some eggs. The sacrifices, therefore, I'm asking you to make in this series of measures are considered by our social partners, I believe, to be reasonable, even if difficult, but necessary. For the most part, by our international observers, as highly responsible. They send a message that Barbados needs to be sending if it is to be taken seriously, as wanting to emerge from the abyss of depression and desolation. Flat on the mat is not where we belong, sir, not my fellow countrymen. Flat is not on the mat where our country's founding fathers willed for us to be. I draw strength today from the title of Nelson Mandela's signature works, Long Walk to Freedom. Yes, it will be long, and yes, it will be winding. But if we all put our hands to the plow, we can and shall make it back to the promised land. Our country needs us. This beautiful country, sir, has been good to us. It is no time for us to rally to the cause. Many years ago, the late Dame Olga Lope-Seal would sing lustily for her children and people across Barbados. If I could sing, I would do so, but I would not inflict such injurious activity upon the people of this country. Let's join hands and show how much we love Barbados. Let's join hands and show how much we care. Young and old will work with one another for the freedom which we hold so dear. Let us raise our voices in thanksgiving for the many blessings which have come our way. Let's join hands and thank the Lord for living on this Independence Day. Today may not be Independence Day, but today we fight for our economic independence and our choices. Many hands make light work. Let's join hands and show how much we love Barbados. Let us stand today for a brighter Barbados tomorrow, punching above its weight. Above all, Mr. Speaker, I leave you simply with the words, all aboard, for love of country. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move the following resolution. Whereas the budgetary proposal and financial statement 2018 delivered by the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investments are made against the background of low fiscal deficits, low levels of foreign reserves, continuously low levels of real gross domestic product growth, high and increasing unsustainable debt to GDP ratio and loss of investor confidence, compounded by a measure of global uncertainty and economic weakness in key markets. And whereas the overall objective is to achieve a surplus of 2% of GDP, and whereas the government of Barbados is fully committed to measures and policies that are designed towards achieving a surplus which is necessary to arrest the decline in foreign reserves and restore a more comfortable level of about 12 weeks, this should read 15 weeks of import cover, reserve cover, reversing the increasing trend of debt to GDP ratio, restoring investor confidence, and spurring economic growth. Be it resolved that the House notes the budgetary proposal and financial statement 2018 delivered by the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investments, and be it further resolved that the House approves the measures and policies outlined in these budgetary proposals and financial statement 2018.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to second that.
I
And reserve the right to speak.
The question is that the aforesaid resolution be so.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move the passing of a resolution to seek the concurrence of the Honorable the House of Assembly in the amendments made by the Honorable the Senate to the Constitution Amendment Bill 2018.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the concurrence of the House of Assembly in respect of the amendments made by the Honourable Senate to the Constitution Amendment Bill 2018.
Beg to second that, sir.
Question is that the Honourable House concur to move the amendment from the passed by the Honourable Senate. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, recommittal of government notices. You know the bill?
To give notice, Mr. Speaker, of the Integrity and Public Life Bill of 2018.
Mr. Speaker, we revert to first readings of bills.
That the Integrity and Public Life Bill be read the first time.
Second.
I beg to second that, Mr. Speaker.
Question is for the bill to be moved second time. Read the first time. Those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
We revert to government business.
This brings us to the end of government business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of today's sitting until 11 a.m. tomorrow, the 12th of June, when the Leader of the Opposition will reply to the budgetary statements and proposals.
Beg to second that, sir.
Question is that the Honourable House be suspended until tomorrow, 11 a.m. in the forenoon, where the Leader of the Opposition will reply. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This brings us to the end of government business. This House now stands suspended until tomorrow, 11 a.m. in the forenoon.